Thank you for joining the DIMPRP Podcast, the podcast that brings together public relations professionals and influencers. I am your host, Vanessa Abron, and I'm glad you joined us today. I am so excited to introduce to you our guest today. Her name is Femi Olafioye-Omogbehin. She is a speaker, blogger, and self-love activist passionately focused on increasing representation for the visibility of Black women in the space. After growing up without seeing enough women who look like her and discovering what that did to her sense of self-worth, she decided to create a brand that encourages other Black women on their journeys of self-love by sharing lessons and observations from her own life in a way that is transparent, honest, and inspires others to intentionally practice self-love as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Femi to the show. So welcome. Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored.
Awesome. So tell me, what have you been up to since I saw you back in March?
Oh, I feel like there's been a lot of things happening for me, obviously with coronavirus kind of canceling a lot of things for me as a speaker, obviously, and also like even as an influencer, as a blogger, a lot of businesses are having to allocate funds and resources to staying open, right? So it's like any budgets that they would have had for product promotion might not be there right now. So there was that initial wave of like, shit, what do I do now? Because all of my events are canceled, all of my product promotions like are on hold. Like, what does that look like? And then like, obviously as a Black woman or just an American, there's been the whole like flare up of racism, right? With like George Floyd. And that really took me out. And on top of that, like personally, I had like my own personal heartbreaks happening like over in the last couple months. And so it was a lot. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We're in a better place now. But like, I would say probably the end of April through mid-July was like really, really, really hard. I think what everything looked like for me was just like asking myself every day, what do I need? Taking everything like moment by moment, making sure that I'm feeding myself, making sure that I'm like taking care of my basic needs, sleeping well, you know what I mean? Like, and processing all the emotion that comes with all of this upheaval.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you're doing better. What were some things that you did to help you get to a better space?
Yeah. Journaling has always been my favorite thing. Like I've been journaling since I was like 12, almost every night. And so I think writing is always a way for me to like put my thoughts like down. And I think I always like provide or prescribe it for other people because our thoughts happen like really quickly. You know what I mean? And like you'll have a thought and all of a sudden you feel bad. And then you're like, I don't even know why I feel bad. Like, what was that? It's like a drive-by, And so for me, journaling helps me like literally lay out the thought word by word in a structure so then I can look back on it and be like, this is what I'm feeling. This is why I feel this. Like, how do I move through this, right? So journaling is really helpful. Getting outside, I think, was really helpful for me and continues to be helpful, just like going to the park and feeling the air and like looking at the trees and breathing and being very present. Because of me and my work, I talked a lot on social media about my own process through especially the racial upheaval. You know what I mean? Just kind of honoring my own space to yell and be angry and to say what I needed to say on Twitter or in my journal, both, But yeah, like those were some of the ways. Oh, and obviously like therapy. I think like I'm a big advocate for therapy. I think everyone should try it. And having my therapist and being able to bounce things off of her has been really, really helpful in this last couple months.
I would say like we did that event back in March and it was a good thing I got it in right then and there.
Honestly, so true. Like right before. Yes.
It was like, I was right there. So it was a good thing I got it in. But I was like you, I would say when the world started shutting down and we started getting the whole stay-at-home mandates, I did have like an anxiety attack for like a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I thought I was sick. I went to the doctor. He's like, Vanessa, you're fine. And
yeah,
you know, like, cause you know, you hear so much on the news that you just like, it psychs you up to believe like, okay, something's wrong with me. Oh, I coughed, something's wrong with me,
oh
you
yeah,
know? And so he was like, Vanessa, unless you, like my doctor's like, Vanessa, unless you have like persisting symptoms or you get worse, like leave me alone.
yeah. Yes, yeah.
And I did get, it did go off like whatever was wrong with me was not long, you
Sure.
know, long lasting. And I think part of it was, you know, like even when you talked about like these like you get this moment of like, where did I get this feeling from? I even think like you kind of psych yourself up to be sick sometimes, you know, when you're not like really sick because you're hearing these things like over and over and over again.
Yep.
So I did have this moment of anxiety, like I had this anxiety attack. And then once I like talked myself out of that and started meditating, I'm a big meditator.
Yes, love
Started
that.
working on, so started doing that and I got better. Started taking walks like you,
Yeah.
enjoying nature, like just getting outside. And you know, I'm in Chicago. I know you're in LA, but in Chicago, it was kind of cold. I still put my coat on and just went outside and
Yeah.
just it made such a difference. And things just got better. And like you said, continue to journal. I'm not a big journaler, but I would do like write out. These are the things that I'm grateful for. You know, these are the great things that happened today. And this is what I'm looking forward to. Like even just doing small things like that was really, really impactful.
Yeah.
So I understand. And also I wanted to address what you said about like when you have like these feelings where you don't know where that feeling came from. As I just mentioned, I'm an energy person.
I love that. Yeah.
And and I'm slowly like telling people about it because I know it's like everyone's like, what do you mean by that? And so and I can get super deep and go over people's heads if I really
Let's do
wanted
it.
to.
Let's
We'll do that offline.
Perfect.
But I do, but what I like as I've been studying it, I've noticed, like you said, like there'll just be like someone could just like walk by and leave an energy of something. And because you're in that space, like you can just pick up on it. You know, and it's like, where did this come from? This isn't me, you know, and that's where meditation does help because it did help me to realize, wait, this isn't me. This isn't my energy. This is from something else. And I even had to tell myself that before I got on this call with you. Like today was one of those days of, it felt like people woke up and said, let's see who can try Vanessa today. From like going to the coffee shop to like driving down the street. It was like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, I get you. So, but we're working through it. We're working through it.
Yeah.
I want to ask you though, has working on your content for your platform, has that been therapeutic for you?
Yeah, at times. Actually, no, I'm just going to scratch that and say yes. Just a flat out yes. Because even as everything has fallen apart around me, and also some things felt like they fell apart inside of me, I feel like reminding myself that I am here for a reason, that I'm like here for a purpose, that I feel like I'm very lucky to know what my purpose is. I think a lot of people are still figuring that out, which is like fine. Like your journey is beautiful wherever you're at on it. But I know that can be a source of frustration for people sometimes when they're like, what should I be doing with my life? You know what I mean? Like I feel very clear on what I should be doing with my life. So I'm very grateful for that. And when I tapped into that, when I reminded myself of what I'm here for, what I need to be doing, it's like what you were just saying about like tapping back into your own energy. Like that's not mine, this is mine. You know what I mean? Like I think that is a renewable resource for us when we realize like, this is who I am, or remember, this is who I am. These are the boundaries of my person. These are the boundaries of my energy. And this is what I was here to do, you know? So I think, like definitely tapping into my work, being grateful that my work is to process my emotions and then share them, you know what I mean? Because then I can, as a Black woman, even, especially like at this heightened time when like everyone's talking about Black people and everybody wants Black voices and like all this stuff, you know, like I was able to at least share from my perspective and say like, first of all, we've been yelling about this for 400 years. So where have you been? Second of all, like, I'm taking care of myself, like, and encouraging, I could use my platform to tell other Black women, because that's my target audience, to take care of yourself. Like, that is an act of resistance. That is enough. Your joy, your laughter, your sensuality, your nice bubble bath with wine, like, that is enough. You know what I mean? So it was very life-giving for me to tap back into that, especially in a time like this when it's like all of this is coming to the surface. You know what I mean?
I just want to like reiterate, like, I think it's so cool how we met because, and like how it's like how everything came together. Cause I remember I hosted the event in LA, being from Chicago, and you were an attendee there. Yes. And you took this amazing photo. It was a candid, so you probably didn't know it was being taken. So we have this amazing photo of you, like, just networking and smiling. I posted on my Instagram, and then my colleagues here in Chicago was like, "Oh, we know her." I'm like, "Oh, look at this, all come full circle." Yes. This was meant to happen. I think nothing is by mistake. I think everything happens for a reason. I just thought that was just like so cool, you know, because I didn't remember your name at the time. And then Taylor, she had tagged you. I was like, okay, I remember her now. I remember. Everybody loves Taylor. Shout out to Taylor.
Yeah, Taylor Barrington.
Yes, I have to get Taylor on one of these days. She's so busy.
Yeah, of course.
But rewinding back to the question. So with all that being said, tell us about like your blog, the content that you developed, why you even started it.
Yeah. So I call myself a self-love activist, and I came up with that just because it's like, I am very passionate about self-love and inspiring that in others and like my own practice. So basically, I grew up in San Diego, California, around a lot of white people, inhaling and ingesting a lot of white-centered media. A lot of my favorite TV shows, books, movies, all of that just featured white people, right? And like, I think with all of that, I internalized that and like ingested and developed a lot of internalized racism, but I didn't have that word for it. I just thought I hated myself. And I thought it was like kind of normal to like, cause you know, it's like teen angst. So it's like everybody hates their body a little bit and wishes they were different, whatever. But like all of the things that I wanted to be fell along racial lines. You know what I mean? Like I wanted thinner lips. I wanted lighter skin. I wanted lighter eyes. I wanted thinner hips and like all of this stuff that was like, I just wanted to look like a white girl. Like that's what that was, you know? And so I like continued through this, and it wasn't until I was like in my early 20s, and I was like 24, I found some Black girl beauty blogs. And it was the first time I saw myself represented. And I wasn't the sidekick. I wasn't the over-sexualized one. I wasn't like the background. I wasn't the token. Like it was just these Black women, and they were being themselves, and they were dressed how they wanted to dress, and they were just like existing and beautiful. And I was like, if they can be beautiful and I can think that they're beautiful, then I can be beautiful too, maybe. You know, it was like the first time that I was like, maybe I don't have to hate myself. And then I like started therapy, and and then like the murders of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown were like very formative for me. When the Trayvon Martin murder happened in 2012, I was still like kind of deeply steeped in this internalized racism thing. So I didn't quite get it, but like there was something about it where I was like, this is off. Like something about this isn't right. And then when Michael Brown was murdered, I was like, oh, okay. So this is what the system is doing. This is what police are doing. This is what America is doing. This is what America has been doing. And so I started learning about racism as a system rather than individual acts committed by the Klansmen or something that we cured with Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. And I started to see the ways that like I had been infected by racism. That's when I came up with internalized racism. I identified that that's what I had been suffering from. And so I decided I was like, if I am going to be the enemy of my society being Black and a woman, then I refuse to be my own enemy. Like, I'm just not going to do that. You know what I mean? They're already out here trying to kill me. I'm not going to help them, you know? So I continue on this journey. About like maybe a couple years later, I'm like reading my journal to my therapist, and she's like, you should start a blog. Like, you have such an interesting writing voice. Because I've heard a lot of people say that I write exactly how I speak. And so I was like, sure, I'll start a blog, whatever. And so I started a blog, started writing. I think I thought something was going to go viral. I thought something would get really popular and then I'd make money from it somehow. That's not how that works. And then about like 2017, I was in this like really dark place because I was in a job that I hated. And I was like, God, what do you want me to do? Like, should I look for another job? Should I just focus on my blog? Like, what should I be doing? And I remember literally praying like that morning, like desperation, like, God, what am I supposed to be doing? And then that night I had a therapy appointment again. And my therapist was like, Fem, you already have a second job. You're just half-assing it. And I was like, I think you're correct. I think that you're right. And so from there,
That's a word.
Right. Exactly. So from there, I hired a career coach, and she kind of helped me see that, like, by the end of 2017, I was seeing that it wasn't just my blog. I had like a message and a business, and I wanted to like make this thing, you know? And that's when I realized that my message was to other women who had been through that exact same thing, who were often the only Black person in the room, who often were asked, like, why do you talk so white? Or like, why do you only date white men? Or like, maybe for themselves wondered why they only dated white men and were wondering like what that was about. You know what I mean? I mean, everyone has their preferences. What I discovered for myself was that was part of me hating myself, was only liking white men. So we threw that out. But anyway, so end of 2017, I'm realizing all these things. I'm like, I have a business. I want to say something. I want to be an advocate for women to love themselves, to practice loving themselves, especially Black women. And I want to be someone who talks actively about how to dismantle racism and the patriarchy, because like they're bullshit. You know what I mean? And like, for me, growing up, not seeing myself represented enough, I know what damage that does. I also started studying like actually like what like psychologically the damage is when you don't have representation or adequate representation in your society, and how it breeds shame and like all these other things. And so I was like, I'm going to create something where I create the representation that I didn't have for other Black women who need to see themselves represented, you know? Yeah, so that's where we're at. And I kept going with my blog, kept going with, you know, influencing, working with brands, Black-owned brands often, and even other brands that I haven't found enough representation in their social media presence that I've seen, to help them with that. And then started my podcast last October. And really all of it is centered around me sharing my experiences, sharing my journey on this self-love process, just to like help other people like find themselves, like see themselves in that story. You know what I mean? And feel less alone and feel more empowered and like all of those things.
Oh my gosh. So that is a lot. And I am so glad that you said it early. Like, we all have a journey, we all have a process. And I think it's so beautiful how we all get through our process, get through our journey. Because what I've noticed is that when I look back at my past, and even the past of others that I speak to, it's those moments of ugly that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's like when you look back and tell the story of like your life, it's always that moment of like, that created something beautiful. Like, I even was talking to a girlfriend of mine. Like, I had broke up with a guy like back in 2017, and I was reflecting on it with a girlfriend of mine. I was like, but actually that's like the starting point of me getting to where I am right now. I was like, you know, I should thank him. Yeah. And I literally did. I called him and I thanked him. I was like, I know it was awkward. You know, I was like, but thank you, because I probably, you know, would not have been here had you not did what you did. And you probably didn't even know that you were doing it. You were just, you know, living part of the
story.
Right. Yeah. It's like, and so it's like, I always tell people, like, when things go bad or things don't go the way we want it to be, like, we just got to stand still and just like trust and believe. Because I feel like that's the moment where it's like, oh, you about to get a breakthrough real soon. Like, if you don't hold on to the fact that this is a bad thing, your breakthrough is like right around the corner. If you just like truly, truly believe in it. You said something really pivotal though. You said that as you start to build your brand, and now that in your platform, and you start to work with different businesses, talk about that. Like, talk about, you know, how you decide to work with different brands, especially you said you worked with predominantly Black products and brands, but you also work with some other brands, not so much, but are looking to expand their audience. Tell us about that. Tell me, and you can start wherever you want.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I think it's interesting because it's like when you start out doing like influencing or really any sort of business, right? You're like kind of taking what you can get, or that's the mindset that you might go into it where it's like somebody's reaching out to me, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do like whatever, you know what I mean? And like, thankfully my Taylor Barrington, who was my coach, plug for her, hire her. She really helped me see like, you know, you have to, it's important to remember what your message is and see what this business message is and see if they align, and always come from a place of like, how can I serve you? How can I like help you, like help this business get out or whatever? Like, what do you feel passionate about with this business? So for working with Black owned brands, especially like Black female owned brands, like that's my passion, because I'm like, I want to support you getting your money. Like, you know what I mean? I want to support you getting your paper. And on top of that, like I worked with Triple O Polish, and what drew me to her was the fact that she was creating like nudes, well, colors in general, but especially nudes, especially designed for darker skin tones. And like I did this whole, I mean, the word nude was part of my racial awakening when I realized that the word nude only covers people lighter than a paper bag, you know? And I was like, why is this word is supposed to be universal? And yet when I'm nude, I am not beige. Like, you know, so like, why is this colored nude? Why are we calling this nude? So anyway, so it like really struck me that she was creating nudes for darker skin tones. And so I was very drawn to that and wanting to bring out that message. And it aligned with my own work of dismantling white supremacy, which is to have us question all of the things that white supremacy built, such as the fact that the color nude is beige. And so I like worked with her. I worked with Africa Boutique, another Black owned brand. And also because I'm Nigerian, my mother and father are both Nigerian. I'm first generation. And so I remember like going through like her stuff, and it reminded me of my father's decor a little bit, you know what I mean? And so there was like a personal tie there. So yeah, I feel like you do want to take on as much as you can, right? Because you're trying to make that money, you're trying to like get out there, you know, but like you also need to be careful and like be cognizant of like, is this aligning? Like, is this together? And I think that's something that I try to be really careful about too when I'm like looking at pitches that brands send me, is like, does this feel like me? Like one time I got a pitch for like a protein shake thing, like, you know what I mean? And like, I love working out. I love being fit, and like, I love like workout clothes and like all that stuff, leggings all day. But like, I don't drink protein shakes. Like, that's just not something that I do. And I was like, I feel like my audience, my community that I've built would see that and be like, what is she doing? Like, what, this isn't what she does, you know? And not that you need to like box yourself into like what your audience knows that you do, but I think it is important that like they're getting to know you, you're getting to know them. So when you do something that's out of character for yourself, they're going to notice and be like, this feels crazy. So yeah, so you just have to be careful with that. One of the other like brands I've worked with in the past has been Bumble, and that's like it's a broader brand, right? Not necessarily Black owned. And
so I'm talking to someone from Bumble soon.
Oh, are you?
The dating app, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm talking to someone from Bumble too. So it's a coincidence that you say that.
I love that. Yeah. So I worked with them, and like I'm still in the process of, yeah, I want to like bring more awareness. That's like one of those what's it called? Partnerships where I'm like, I feel like this is important for me to share my story because I'm a Black woman, and because like we need to talk about Black women's experiences in dating because it's different because racism, you know what I mean? So that's a partnership and that one was one of those things where it's like, we happened to meet, like me and the connect that I ended up partnering with we were like at the same event or something that I spoke at. And then we like happened to like hang out at the bar after. And then she like happened to come with us to dinner. And like, you know what I mean? It's like one of those, I feel like those stories are always annoying for people who are like trying to break in because they're like, oh, okay, so I just have to like hang out at a bar.
Basically, yes, though.
But kind of.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. And that's
yeah.
not to cut you off, but that's all
Yeah.
businesses. Like there's any industry, like majority of businesses exchange take place through just like common mutual interactions.
Mhm.
And just caveat, I've never
Yep.
gotten a job from anybody from applying from it online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ever.
Yeah. I don't think I have either. I mean, I've only worked one real job, but yeah, I agree. I think because it's like I've heard this and Taylor says this all the time. And like, I've heard you say this before too, like business is relationships, you know, like, it's, do I want to work with you? Because working with you is spending time. It's spending my life, like part of my life with you. Like, are you a pleasant person? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, and it's like, yeah, be professional and also be chill. Like, I feel like that's like really what it comes down to. But yeah, and that's the story with like the Bumble Connect. And that's one of those ones where it's like, okay, this isn't like a Black owned brand. It's not like super niche, but it is important for me. It feels important for me to share my story in it because it's another place where I can offer a mirror for other Black women who maybe are going through the dating process and finding themselves a little stressed or tired or, you know what I mean? Just kind of like trying to make it through.
Have you ever had any weird or awkward interactions or just unpleasant interactions with like a PR professional as an influencer?
I actually don't think so.
Yay!
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I've met, so mostly the people that I feel like the brand, maybe this is naive of me, but I'm like the brands that I've like reached out to, maybe the PR person did respond to me, but they were always very kind, always very like, I think there was one brand where they were like kind of curt and I had my feelings hurt and then had to go like eat ice cream for a little bit. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, mostly it's been chill. It's just like, I think it's just remembering that like no's are going to happen. You know, I think that that's like the biggest thing is like not taking it personally. And sometimes it feels personal, especially when they're saying no to your face in your inbox, you know, like that will feel personal. But I think when you remember, like, they're doing a job, you still have your purpose. If it comes back, it comes back. Because that's the other thing too, is that sometimes I think Yvonne Orji said this in one of the Jesus and Jalaf podcast episodes that she did. But she said like a no now is not a no tomorrow or something like that. And I love that because it's true. Like there have been brands that I've worked with where like I approached them months ago and they're like, like lukewarm about it. And then later they find me and they're like, oh my gosh, like we would love to give this to you and this, you know what I mean? And like, I think that you just have to stay in your power and stay in your purpose and your lane and like keep working and like remember that what is meant for you will be yours, you know?
What are your thoughts working with PR people who are also looking for earned media?
Yeah. I respect it. I respect it, definitely. I think for me, I don't have any judgments about it, I guess is what I should say. I'm not like at all ever judging a PR person or the business for trying to like use that angle, use earned media. I think for me, it's just about like deciding like, is this worth it to do? Does it feel aligned in other ways? Maybe I will get access to an audience that I wouldn't normally get. Like, you know what I mean? Is there value in other ways? Also, like, do I feel passionately about this brand? Like there's a brand that I just recently worked with where they even came out straight up and were like, we can't pay influencers right now because we had to close the stores. Everything's closed, right? And so they're like, we can't afford to pay influencers right now, but we would love to gift you like a couple of looks. And if you could post about them, like that would be great. And we'd love to like build a relationship, like whatever. And I happen to love this brand, you know? And so I'm like, because I love the brand and like love what they're doing, I agree to it, even though I don't really typically like agree to like earned media exchanges. And I feel, well, and that's also like pre-coronavirus, because like, you know what I mean? Because I think that I had a standard in place and then everything went to shit. So it's like, we're having to reevaluate some things right now. But yeah, typically I don't normally, or I'm not normally into that. But then with this brand, I was like, you know, I love this brand, I will. So I think it just depends on your relationship to the brand, what they're offering you. Does it feel like you can find value in other places, like, etc.
That's exactly what it should be. And I think that's also the reason why I started the conversation, is because I think that what you said was exactly perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do think it's a couple of things. I think from the PR standpoint, especially those who work at large agencies, it's like, okay, you have to do this and you have to get these amount of impressions based upon what the client said you have to do. So you have like people on the team and like, you just gotta go. So it's like, okay, I only have so much time. I have to send out all, you know, I gotta just, you know, throw some stuff on the wall and see what sticks, you know? And so sometimes it's like, it seems very cold and personal and personable, but sometimes like having had worked in that atmosphere at one time is like, I know, like, I'm not trying to be this way, but this is, you know, what I'm getting on this side. Whereas when I became independent, you know, I can have conversations one-on-one with my client and say, how about we just, you know, be more intentional and more specific about how we go about this? Like you said, it should be that way. So on the flip side, like I mentioned in the events, is that before there were influencers, before there were bloggers and YouTubers, we only reached out to magazines, TV shows, newspapers. And it's the same thing. Does this, you know, this is what we're sending you. Does it align? And the editor or the journalist will say yes or no. And it was only a handful of products that they would say yes to. And then, you know, of course, but if we reached out to them enough, you know, then we start to develop the relationship, and then they're like, okay, I'll consider it. Oh, I actually do like this. So it was like it's this relationship building. But because influencers and bloggers aren't inherently journalists, it was kind of like, I think we were like the ones that were reaching out to influencers like they were journalists, but they didn't feel, you know, they don't feel like they're journalists. So it was like, what are you doing?
They didn't have they didn't feel like they need to respond as journalists.
Right. Yeah. And so, and I think the miscommunication was like, I think some influencers felt bullied or like, oh, you're sending this. And I was like, no, you can say no. You can, like, we're used to people telling us no.
Right.
You know, we're looking for the one that's going to say, yes, this is for me. It's like, okay, let's start this communication. And actually, I have seen some where the earned influencer relationship did turn into paid. And so, but if it's like the true relationships, not the relationships where it's like, okay, yeah, I'll do a post for you and that's it. You know, like I remember once I was working with this particular brand and we were looking for an influencer for a paid project. And I was doing this outreach, and my favorite influencers, like the ones that I recommended to the brand, were the ones who came back to me and was like, well, what are you trying to do? You know, because I'm like, oh, you know, we're looking to do this. You know, part of this project is we want X amount of posts, this and this and that, this and that. And it's like, well, hold on. You know, if you're really trying to get this, I recommend you do this. And then with my audience, you can do this. It was like, oh, you know, so by you telling me that, it's like, oh, now you're invested in making us, you know, look good too.
Yeah.
So I was like, even though that's not what I came to the table with, you came back with this, like that was the one, because I felt like that was like now we're developing a relationship as opposed to me giving you money and you act like a robot.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Yeah. And I totally agree. I feel like those are the best conversations because then they're mutually beneficial, right? Like I love asking that question. Like when people come to me asking for something or like trying to pitch something, it's like, well, what is your goal? Like, do you want more impressions? Do you want more engagement? Do you want, like, you know what I mean? Like, because then I can tailor what I do to fit that. Cause I know what works for my content, you know what I mean? So I can like tell you how we can fit your product or service or whatever it is into my content so that it works best for the goal that you're trying to meet.
And I feel like those are the influencers that like last longer. Cause like now it doesn't matter if you have numbers. You know, I think at one point it was all about like, well, how many followers do you have? And,
Yeah.
you know, what's the engagement rate? And it's like, you can buy those now. So it's like, you know, so it's like, that doesn't matter. You have to like you said, what is the actual, and when I say engagement, I'm not even talking about engagement as far as likes or comments, but engagement with the audience and starting a conversation and it being interactive, you know?
Yeah. I saw something like that too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just.
No, this is what this all is about.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, no, I saw something about that too. Like how, gosh, I think it was on like Tumblr or something, where they were talking about how like, it feels like we're shifting even more, especially with everything that's happening politically, like this being an election year, the whole like racial upheaval, the coronavirus thing, like we're shifting more, like people are wanting to hear more from people who have something to say, like versus like someone who's just really hot, like posing, you know what I mean? And like no shade to like anybody who's like super hot and posing. I'm also super hot when I pose, you know what I mean? Like I love doing that. But like people are wanting more like substance, you know what I mean? Like wanting more like someone who is shifting the culture somehow, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I agree, like that feels like what is going to be more lasting is just like people who can create. It's not necessarily the people who have like millions of followers or like even like you were just saying, like the engagement rate, like yes, but it's about like, are you starting a conversation? Are you investing in the people who follow you? Are you giving them space to like talk to each other? You know what I mean? Like, are you creating community? Like, I feel like that's like the thing.
Exactly. Creating a community is the perfect way to say it. I have another story too about like how numbers aren't as important because it's like I'm in a weird position because like I can recommend to a brand, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to pick. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was like a couple of years ago, and we were I was working with one particular client in an influencer campaign. And we had to put together this deck, and we had all these different influencers. And this is so-and-so, and she has this follower. And the one I was pushing for didn't have the most followers, but I knew she could deliver, exactly what they were looking for. Like I knew she had like the savviness, the way that she talked. Like I just knew she was perfect. Mm-hmm. So she ended up not getting the job. Mm-hmm. But the person who I was working on that account with was working on another account for a different brand. And she got picked for that one. Mm-hmm. And how that came about was like a back end thing where someone else had recommended her, which I kind of felt slighted about. I was like, I tried to tell you that this girl was hot, good. And she's like, well, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, you were caught up on the numbers. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why you didn't pick her.
Yeah.
But now that someone else of some other influence mentioned it, you now paid attention to it. Sure. Yeah. And of course she did deliver the way that I knew that she would deliver. Yeah. Sure. So I can attest for sure that numbers mean absolutely nothing. I have another client who worked with another influencer, and it was so funny. Her feedback, she was like, you look at this person on their account and you see like their pictures and things like that, but then you get them in person. She got this influencer in person. The person was so dry. Like just so dry, had no personality.
No.
And she was just so disappointed. Like, like, wow, like it's amazing. Like you look at their page, but in real life, they weren't that way.
It's different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is not about the numbers. And that's why what you said earlier was important. That's why I was out at dinner and we had this exchange. Like, that's why it's important to do those things. Like, you can't just stay behind your laptop or behind your phone and your device, because it's actually the people interactions. Because when I meet you, even though I'm looking at your numbers, when I see you, I was like, yeah, but you got something.
Right.
And I know that by me seeing that you got something, I know this can work. Mm-hmm. And I think that was another thing too with the influencers, that I had engaged with her in person. So I knew that she had it, what they were looking for, because it was a red carpet thing that we were doing. Mm-hmm. And But she ended up getting it at the long run. It was a different account, but she ended up getting it, and I'm happy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I agree. I feel like that's something that like influencers have to keep in mind. At least that's what I keep in mind, that like my winning thing is my personality. Like and I feel like that should be true for most influencers. That's why you're an influencer. You're magnetic. You're like, people are drawn to you. People want to listen to what you have to say. You know what I mean? So keeping that in mind for myself, I'm like, best impression is always going to be in person. Like, you know, like if we're face to face, I'm gonna try my best to charm you. Next best is gonna be over the phone. Like I try to get like brands or whatever, if they're like in New York or like Chicago, whatever, somewhere else, like I'll try to be like, okay, let's hop on the phone so I can at least like have you hear what I'm like, you know? And then the third option is like electronic, because it's like through email you can like show a little bit of your personality, but really like it comes way more through like on the phone and in person, and that's how you're gonna hook people. Is like with your personality, you know?
Yeah, you have to use online to get them on the phone at least.
Yes.
Or on a Zoom call.
Yes.
I have another horror story for you. Well, it wasn't a horror story, but an influencer reached out to another client of mine and it was like, oh, you know, I'll promote your brand on my, you know, I'll do a post and blah, blah, blah. So the brand reached out to me and was like, can you look into this? I looked into it and they said, oh yeah, I would love to promote your brand. I'll do this for this post and this post and this post. So he pushed back and was like, okay, cool. Can you show us a deck of, you know, of your capability, you know, your capabilities, what you bring to the table, things like that. No response.
None? Okay, well, they didn't want to get paid then.
Exactly. Like they just, so it was like, okay, so you obviously was just randomly trying to see where you can get a couple of dollars. Like who was going to be the sucker that was going to give you a few dollars for a post because you have these numbers.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed.
I never understood that. Yeah, I don't understand that, because I'm like, I feel like when someone trusts me with even just a free thing, earned media, right? Let alone with like paying me. Like, I'm like, I take that very personally. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I have a responsibility for, this isn't just like a face, whatever exchange, you're throwing dollars at me, I'm throwing something up on my Instagram. I'm like, no, I want to make sure that you got what you like were asking for, because like you're giving me things of value, you know? And so I don't know. I feel like I never understand when people are just like wanting to, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like do something like that. Like that feels like so strange.
I think, and what I'm noticing too, like even from doing the events, I think there's in this influencer world is like really evolving, because first it wasn't influencer. First it was bloggers. It started with bloggers. Then it evolved to bloggers and YouTubers, and you know, then you had like the people who had the Twitter followers because they were just like really starting conversations on Twitter. Then Instagram came, and then basically you had people that became really, really popular based upon their Instagram following and things like that. So now it's like, okay, we're just going to call them all influencers. So then what happened was, I think at the beginning it was a little bit more fun, because when you have, like you said, when you have a blog, when you have a YouTube channel, you know, this influencer job title wasn't a title of a job quite yet. It was just people doing what they love. And because they did what they love, it resulted in being something profitable.
Yeah.
So then when people started saying like, oh, this is profitable, let me get in on this. So then you have people that saw, okay, this could be lucrative. I can take a bunch of pretty pictures. I'm cute. I'm sexy. You know, I have I can create a background, or I have the money, or I have the time, or whatever it was. They're like, I'm gonna get in on this. And then they got in on this, and they were able to figure out the algorithm and get the followers and things like that. And then it's like you said, now it's like, okay, this is what I'm gonna, and they only, instead of relationships, it's like, okay, for a post is this, for a post is, you know, if you want this post, you're going to pay this. If you want two, it's going to be this. If you want a story, it's like, well, no, what about the person conversation? Exactly. Like what about, I've noticed that, and then I met influencers who were kind of like stuck in the middle, where they felt like they had to play that game You know, like, okay, I'm an influencer, so I'm supposed to be getting money. So I'm supposed to just be reaching out to brands. And then, you know, in my role, I've been able to, of course, thankfully be able to, I don't say mentor, but consult be a passerby consultant and be like, no, like, you don't have to do what everyone else is doing. Like, let the other ones, you know, be the ones that just like, you know, pay me for a post, you know, be the one trick pony. You be the one that's developing the relationships and that you have a long lasting brand. And because at the end of the day, like, yeah, everybody can do this. It's going to be like that. I don't know. I'm rambling.
No, I think that you're absolutely right. Like, that makes sense to me. And I think like something that drives me always is just that, like, I think vulnerability is what sells. Like that's like what makes things popular. That's what makes people want to come to it, is like honesty, vulnerability, showing up. And I'm grateful that I guess have noticed that pattern in like things that are successful, because then I'm like, when it comes to my own work, I'm like, I have to be in it. Like it has to be coming from my person. Otherwise this is going to fall flat on the Instagram page. It's going to fall flat in my stories, and everyone's going to see it and nobody's going to care about it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like I wish maybe that more people like felt that, or you know what I mean? They're like, were more about like realizing that I need to bring my person into this. This isn't just an Instagram post. This isn't just a story. This isn't just me talking. This is me. This is something that needs to connect with me. And if it doesn't connect with me, then maybe I should find something else that does, you know, because that's how I'm going to affect change in my circle, in this world, in my city, like all these things. Like, it all has to come from me being like authentically myself, you know? Yeah. But it's, I don't know. A lot of people don't, not that a lot of people don't get it, but it's just easier to chase a dollar, maybe. I don't know. Like,
do you have a lot of influencer friends?
I don't actually think so. No, I have like one woman that I met a couple years ago at like it was like a woman business owners in San Diego or something like that, like mixer. And we've stayed in touch like the last couple years. And then I have a friend that I met at one of your events, actually. I think maybe the first one that I went to. Yeah.
Oh, tell me.
Malika.
Yes.
Yeah. Or is it, wait, shoot. I know there's Malika and then there's
Malvika?
No, Malvika. So I think it's Malika Kelly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So like I've seen her at a couple of your events and like love staying in touch with her like over Instagram. But I don't, like, my close friends are not in this space.
How do your family and friends feel about you being in this space? Like, do they think it's weird? They like, what are you doing? I can even say as a PR professional, like, my family members like still like, what do you do? It's like they really don't know what it is that I do.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, my mother, God bless her, she's from Nigeria, as I mentioned earlier. They don't know any jobs other than doctor, lawyer, engineer, and nurse. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's it. And I have my degree in engineering actually because of that situation. So yeah, when I started my own business, my mom was like, what the fuck? Like, what are you actually doing? She doesn't curse, so she didn't say that, but it's paraphrasing. And still, she doesn't really understand it, but she is supportive now, which is a surprise. I did not think.
Did you see Yvonne Orgy's stand-up comedy show?
Yes. And it's everything that I want to do. Like, literally, I'm like, that's exactly everything that she's like said about her parents. Even the whole like thing about going back to Nigeria now that she's made it, like buying her mom a nice like all of that is, I'm like, Mom, don't you worry. Yours is coming. I actually showed it to my mom too, and she laughed, which is a surprise because my mom does not laugh at American comedy, like, ever. So
she doesn't count though. You know.
Exactly. It's Nigerian. That's why she liked it. That's why my mom liked it. Yeah. So my mom doesn't know what is happening, but she's like, you know what? Praying for my daughter. God bless. I'm going to keep believing. And then some of my friends, it's been a mixed bag, actually. Like, I think there are some of my friends who like see it and get it. And they're like, I think all of my friends would say they fully support me. which is true-ish. Some of my friends would like be like, we see it, we get it, we're here for you. Like I can talk to them about my business. Some of my friends, I can't talk, and I don't talk to them about my business. I think that they are supportive, they just don't understand. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me. Well, I mean, a lot of things have been hard since creating this business, but one of the things that like I navigated was the shift in my friendships, where it was like there were people that I went to for everything, like who were my like closest people. And when I made this shift into this business, they couldn't be my closest people anymore. You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of breaking down and building up of like breaking down of other relationships and building up of other relationships. Like people that I maybe had as peripheral friends before, like didn't like have them as close. Like now they're like very, very close to me because they see this and they see that they feel safe people that I can talk to about my business and my work. And that's like no shade against like any of the other friends, you know what I mean? I'm like, everyone has their, I don't know if you ever read The 4 Agreements. Have you heard of that book?
No, but I can definitely attest to what I have my own story that's very similar to yours.
Yeah. Well, the 4 Agreements, basically one of the things that it talks about in that book is that like everyone is living according to their own dream or according to their own perception. So it's like, if you say, I want to make $1 million and someone else says, you can't do that, it's because they think that they can't do that. You know what I mean? They have no idea what you can do. So like,
right.
As I'm talking to my friends, the friends that like weren't able to see it or had to fall away because I'm like, I want to do this business, I have these goals, like all this stuff. And they're like, you can't do that. I'm like, you can't do it because you think that you can't do it, but I know that I can. So I'm going to, and we're going to stop engaging as closely because like, I can't have you near that close to something that's this valuable and that needs to be protected, you know? So yeah, like there are some friends that had to fall away because of that. And there are some friends that came closer, and I'm like very grateful for one of my friends. I'm like basically going to hire her as my executive assistant. Like once I can afford her, like, because I'm like, she's even specified, like that's her like dream job is to be someone's like executive assistant, you know? And I'm like, I'm hiring you. Like, and she's already currently like helping me like figure out like strategies.
That's beautiful.
It's so amazing, right? It's like incredible. So I'm like, people like that I'm so grateful for. And like, I'm so grateful to have, I think also to make that space in my life, because I think sometimes when friendships break down like that, it's disorienting. And it was for me, definitely. But looking back, I'm seeing that it gave me space to listen to myself, to like hear my own intuition, to choose my own sense over choosing someone else's like voice or 2 cents or like whatever, you know? So yeah, it's been mixed. It's definitely been mixed.
I'll tell you my story too, as a way of maybe hopefully it'll give you some sense of comfort or just letting you know that we have a match here. But even though it's a different industry, like when I became independent, when I made that shift from being a 9-to-5 corporate person to being independent, it was hard. And to be completely honest, I don't talk about this often, but it's not a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Before I became independent, like my journey to become independent wasn't planned, to say the least. Like I lost a job and I was like stuck in this world and I was looking for other jobs. And I was like, none of this is working. I might as well create my own job.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how that came about. And I remember during that time, I had, my friends, and they were friends of mine that I had for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like telling them, like, and I remember like one particular friend had a very strong personality, and I didn't tell her stuff. And the reason why I didn't tell her wasn't because I wasn't that I was trying to be secretive, but I wasn't strong enough to like just listen to what she had to say and just dismiss it if it didn't. Like I didn't know how to I didn't know how to separate the energy yet.
Yes.
So as I was trying to figure it out, I wouldn't talk to her. So she got mad at me for not talking to her about it. So then when I started talking to her about it, I would feel worse. It's like I feel worse after talking to you than I did before I started talking to you. And I remember it was like she'll say things like, well, maybe this is like, because, there's a struggle in this entrepreneurship game.
Sure.
No matter what industry you're in, you're going to struggle at some level.
Mm-hmm.
So I was struggling a little bit, and she was like, oh, maybe this just isn't for you. Legit, girl, hung up the phone with her crying. So thank God, for to follow my intuition.
Yeah.
And I started meeting like other entrepreneurs, and they was like, no, this is part of the game. This is, you're good. Just keep going, blah, blah, blah. But long story short, like you said, that friendship ended. And same thing, friendships that were around, like they started to increase. Like I became closer with people that were already in my life. But when she was around, they were around, but they weren't as close. And then when she left, these people got closer.
Yeah.
And the beauty in it was like, I remember when we stopped being friends, it was her and it was another person. And when we stopped being friends, like it was so much hurt in that.
Yeah.
But as I reflect now, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, because I couldn't be doing the things that I'm doing now had I held on to those friendships and that way of thinking. And like, I'm so grateful that she cut me off, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like she broke up with me.
Yeah.
I was like, why are you breaking up with me? What did I do?
Yeah.
And it was a blessing. So it is interesting. Like it goes back to what I said, like whether you're an influencer, a PR professional, a welder, like whatever it is you're doing, like if you're doing something on your own, you're just doing something that's just not traditional.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you definitely want to have to shift through your friends to make it happen.
One of the other books that I read that I love is called The Alter Ego by I think Timothy something, I can't remember, but the Alter Ego Effect. That's what he talks about. And so the book is about basically like stretching yourself, becoming your hero self, and the obstacles that you face and like ways that you can overcome those obstacles in order to like become your fullest self, your highest self. And he talks about how one of the biggest obstacles we have is separating from our current community, because like we're social creatures, you know what I mean? Like the thought of being separated from the group is literally devastating to us, like on a primal, like evolutionary level. And so he's like, for a lot of us, that subconsciously is running in our minds when we're thinking about like, because when we think about our hero self, what is she like? She probably makes more money than a lot of the people that she knows now. She probably has a different work schedule in the day than the people that she knows now. You know what I mean? And it's like, when you start to think about becoming your highest self, you're like realizing like there are some things that I'm not going to be able to relate to my friends on anymore. Like we're not going to be able to talk about, like, we're not going to be able to bond on how broke we all are anymore. You know what I mean? Like we're not going to be able to bond about like how much it sucks to come home from work at like 7 p.m. like stressed and like our boss is like on us about something else anymore or something. You know what I mean? Like there are all of these things where it's like you're going to lose connections, and that might be keeping you, the fear of losing those people might be keeping you from stepping into your higher self. But what he talks about is remembering that, I forgot how he put it, but basically it's what you and I were just talking about, where it's like, you have to trust that as you lose community, there will be community that will come for you. You know what I mean? Like the universe will bring you people to surround you as you lose, if you lose the people that are currently around you, you know? And I was like, I think that's something that I think about a lot too, as I'm shifting and as I'm continuing to grow, that like things are going to change. But like I keep on my vision board, like people who are in the space right now, who I want to be in connection with, who I want to be friends with, who I want to be like close to, you know what I mean? Cause I'm like, this is the community that I am headed towards, that I feel headed towards. And so I think that it's helpful. I don't know if like you have a vision board. It sounds like you would have a vision board if you're into like energy and all that stuff. But I don't know. I just feel like that's a helpful thing for at least me, is to like have a vision of like where I'm going as all of these things are changing.
I don't have a vision board anymore. Okay. But what I do have is something very similar. It's called My Infinite Agenda. So it's a book where it's kind of like where I do my micro journaling, where I have a book, and at the beginning of the year, I write, these are my goals for the year. This is what I want to accomplish. So you write that out at the beginning of the year. And so then at the beginning of each month, you're like, okay, what am I going to accomplish each month? So I go back and I look at that list of goals for the year, and I kind of like break it down. Like, okay, what are some small things I can do this month that's going to bring me closer to getting to that goal for the year?
Yeah.
So then it's for the month. So now you have your goals for the month. So then you go through the day and it's like, what are your goals for today?
Yeah.
And so I go back and I look at the month. I'm like, okay, this month I want to do this. So today I can do this to reach this goal. So then I reach all the goals for the month. So every time I reach the goals for the month, I go back and look at the year. And then I'm usually done with my goals by the end of before the year is over with.
I love that.
I've already reached my goals for the year that I could achieve this year.
Will you send me the link for a journal like that? I would love to try it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, the only goal that I couldn't do this year is travel abroad.
Sure. And that was not your fault.
And I was like, well,
it's not your fault.
I'm like, well, that's one goal that I don't have to worry about this year. But everything else, I've pretty much done already. Yeah. And it's July.
I love it. So
it's like, okay, I gotta get new goals now. Yep. But that's fun. Like, okay, what do I want to do now?
Yeah. Love that.
Well, Femi, I could talk to you all day.
I know.
But we're gonna have to wrap this up. The next conversation will be our esoteric conversation.
Remind me what esoteric is. I always forget what that word means.
Let me Google it because I don't want to say it incorrectly. I know what it means in like theory.
The like energy of it, right? Yeah. I feel like
it's like mystical. So it means esoteric means is intended for or likely to be understood only by a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest.
Ooh, okay.
But the images of it are, astrology.
Yeah, I was gonna
say tarot cards.
Yes,
sacred geometry.
Yes. I'm ready for that next conversation.
Yes. I'm slowly but surely revealing this to people. I'm leaving little trails that this is who I am.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, I will talk to you later. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Vanessa. I hope you have a great
rest of your day. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of your content.
Yes. Thank you so much.
No problem. Bye. Well, this has been another fabulous episode of the DIMPRP Podcast. I'm looking forward to having you join us again.